Welcome to More Reliability, Less Firefighting, How to Build a Proactive Reliability Program. I'm your host, Gavin Cahill, and we have Jeff Nikoloff, Principal Engineer at Gremlin, and General Reliability Genius. So before we get started, some little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on demand after the webinar ends. You should get a follow-up email with this once Big Marker is done processing the recording. There will also be a short Q&A at the end, so please drop your questions in the Q&A box. And as always, we appreciate your feedback, so please let us know how we did and if there's anything you think we can improve. Thank you again for joining. And let's get started. To kick us off, Jeff, I have a question. Why are we here today? And why do you think people joined us today?
Well, I mean, we're here today to talk about how to actually start getting ahead of your reliability issues and get out from behind the eight ball, chasing incident after incident. I know that I played that game for a very, very long time, and I know how frustrating it can be. And I'd imagine that some people just want to hear what we have to say about the subject, and some people are in situations that they'd rather not be in and are looking for anything they can to get out from behind it. So if I had to guess.
Awesome. So yeah, let's jump into the slides.
Cool. All right, everybody, I'm Jeff, and we're all here today to talk about reliability. Get in the right screen. So why are we here? I mean, most people know why Gremlin's here. Reliability is our business. Our mission is to build a more reliable internet. I think the real question is, why are you here? And I'd have to imagine that you're here because you're responsible for something that's valuable. You're responsible for something that people depend on, and you play a role in making that better. And you do want to make a difference. No one has to be on a webinar about reliability management. No one has to join this call. If you're here because you care. You want to make a difference, and maybe it's just a point of pride. Maybe you want to run products that work when people need them, right? And this is something that's important to you because you don't have to be here, right? But you are. So clearly, this must be something that's important to you. I know it's been important to me. This is something that I've been working with, and I've been on call for critical systems for almost 2 decades, and I know that it was something that really resonated with me. So, that's why I would be here. What that really means is that you're here as a leader. You whether or not you have the position in your organization, a leadership role, you are here being a leader. Means that you want to take responsibility and you want to make a difference in your organization and in your products, and for the people depend on you. And often that means it's a bit of a burden and a point of pride for people that are acting like leaders, that are being leaders, right? Because it's not just something that you can just do. It's something that you have to work with people, that you have to push through challenges and friction. It's something that you have to, really, invest in order to see progress, right? But that's sort of the name of the game. If being was a leader is easy, everybody would do it, right? But you're here, you want to do it, and if you're going as far as to learn strategies for being more effective at that, then you're probably willing to go a bit further. And if only it was easy. Leading organizational change means a lot of things, and it fails for all sorts of reasons, right? You end up with false starts. People say that they want something and then they don't, or sometimes you're pitching something that's really easy to agree with up front, but getting follow through from your partners turns out to be easier said than done, right? Everybody has to deal constantly with shifting or competing priorities, especially in years like this year, where the changing economic situation has everybody changing their plans, and then there's always the good old organizational friction. Maybe you deal with not just competing priorities, but competing agendas. You have different people have different visions for the solution. or other like internal politics that come into play that undermine efforts like these. And sometimes you just end up in an undermanaged organization where you have low systems of accountability and low engagement, right? And these are all super common challenges, not just with reliability changes, but with any change. Just generally effective operations. These are changes, right, or challenges. And this is going to be no different from anything else. And so part of our big mission is we want to make that as easy as possible. We want to help. We want to bring the tools that we can where we can in order to help make those things that we can as easy as possible. And really, we're here to provide as much guidance as we can about steering your program or your organization's success as best we can. Personally, I came to Gremlin about 1.5 years ago. Before that, I was a director of engineering with PayPal. I owned the lower half of the Venmo stack, which included our SRE, our infrastructure engineering, our cloud engineering, our common platforms, data infrastructure, technical excellence. So I've kind of like seen it all, right? And I jumped to I've been here working in tech for 12 years, or I'm sorry, for over 20 years. And played a part in a lot of like the current modernization stuff. Wrote a book, Docker in Action. But I came to Gremlin about 1.5 years ago because it was a unique opportunity. Like I'd been working on building reliable systems for so long that I had an opportunity to come and jump to the other side of the ship and build tools to help people build more reliable tools. And I couldn't pass that up, right? So that's why I'm here, right? Because I've been a customer. I've been where you are, and I've seen those uphill battles and the common struggles, right? And why Gremlin? Because Gremlin is sort of it. The Gremlin mission really resonates with me, which is to build a more reliable internet. And what that means is that we do whatever we can to help people build more reliable systems everywhere. Sometimes that means building tools and products. Sometimes that means, putting together webinars like this and coaching and, teaching about like the management side of these problems. And, as a result, Gremlin's used by, over 100 members of the Fortune 2000, including a whole bunch of big banks, people with real money on the line, people, companies with critical systems. We've run, millions of chaos experiments just and reliability tests, right? Like there are not very many companies with as much experience. And certainly with the brain trust that we have here, it's a great crew to be a part of. And certainly our common background building those reliable systems is what really attracts me to being here, right? It's really well aligned mission and well aligned with you and everybody who is trying to build these things. But at the end of the day, all the tooling in the world is only going to get you so far. At the end of the day, you have to build an operationalized practice around these things. It's going to be, it's not a one and done thing. Like you can't just buy something and poof, all the things are out there. It is a tool. It has to be used. All these things are tools that have to be put into use and into regular use. And any kind of like lasting change has to be measured, and it has to be, your strategies have to be adjusting. You have to, figure out what your organization needs at the moment, but keep that vision, keep that high bar for quality and reliability in focus, and make sure that you're pursuing that in a reasonable and responsible way. So part of that the operationalization bit is, for me, the thing that made the biggest difference in the last few organizations that I've worked with. And what we're talking about today, what I'm here to present to you is a bit of a checklist around, like a framework for building best-in-class reliability programs. What do I mean? I mean, like often funded, at least partially funded efforts where your organization is tracking, is measuring your reliability, tracking efforts to improve that reliability, and building systems of accountability to help make sure that interests are aligned across the organization, that we really are making the improvements that we've said that we want to make, right? There's 4 basic components to this to any of these frameworks, but the first one being, setting, like deciding on the strategy and aligning with leadership, making sure that the mission is very, very clear. The second bit is all about ownership of the program and ownership of the pieces, the things that you're measuring, the things that you want to improve the reliability on, your applications, your production components, things like that. Third bit is agreeing on how you're going to measure these things, like making sure that the way that you're measuring them align well with the business, align well with real impactful things, so that they don't feel like proxy metrics, so they don't feel like artificial things that people ultimately will not put much faith in or dismiss easily. And the last bit is a few checklist items around setting clear processes, how to operationalize this thing, and about which kind of like policies or processes that you need to account for, because these events do happen and it's better to think about it beforehand than not. So I want to dive into strategy and leadership first. Start at the beginning, right? The big why. And here, like the first item on the checklist, define a clear, specific mission, and you're going to use that mission to derive what your goals are, right? Bring it back to the business. Bring it back all the way to the customer if you can, right? And say, like, this is what the customer needs. This is what they expect from us. These are the pain points that they feel when we have reliability problem X, right? And this is where you're setting a bar for yourself, for your applications, for your organization. Once you have that very high level statement, things that generally most people in your organization will agree with, this is very, very important, because as you're having those alignment conversations with your partner groups, or as you're seeking funding or justification for the program up through the ranks, up into executive and management, these need to be things that people can understand quickly and get behind, right? And if they can't, there's, it's great. It honestly, it's a great moment when you can put out a statement that you think generally like that everyone will have alignment on, and when you don't, there's other questions to ask, right? Like we're missing some common context. So it's a great place to start, probably the most important place to start. One way or another, you'll learn something, or you'll come out with a tool that you can use to align incentives further down the road. The second bit is identifying some initial timelines and mission critical dates. Now, this doesn't mean like delivery timelines in the project sense, because reliability is not a project. These timelines and mission critical dates, these are more like business driven dates, business driven events, a cycle of business, the things where, especially for cyclical businesses, or businesses that have, that are event driven, right? My time at Venmo, there was 4 or 5 days a year that saw incredible traffic, right? And so we knew that if we like, this was the game day, right? You needed to make sure. We never wanted to be unreliable, but we knew that if we were going to have reliability moments, it better not be in those times, right? And so most businesses have those things. And when you're driving reliability program, it should be informed by those big dates and timelines.
Am I the only one curious what those dates were? I have to know.
Well, I mean, any big, like, so yeah, I mean, fair enough, right? So there's always Super Bowl parties. Anytime anyone's splitting meals, at Venmo, anytime anyone is, getting together in big celebration times, right? So like 4th of July is big, Super Bowl's big, the NBA finals games are big, things like that, where people are getting together and being really social is really the whole value of that platform, right? That was their bread and butter. So
So this
it was,
ties back to that first bit of knowing your audience and the customer impact.
oh yeah. Like you have to know your business, right? You don't, it's going to be a hard pitch if you say, oh yeah, we need to be always up and always have, you have to make a business case for it. And because there are different ways that you will solve reliability problems depending on the context, right? Context is important. I'm going to say that 100 times today, right? But if you only have one day a year where you even do business, do you need 24/7 reliability measures? Probably not, right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't do work to make sure that you're reliable that one day. In fact, if anything, it means you should do a heck of a lot more work ahead of time to make sure that you're going to be reliable, because if you miss it, you're going to miss your year, right? So it makes it different. The way that you prepare has to be informed by the context. That context is going to be the business, the shape of your organization, the relationships that you have, the centralization or decentralization of responsibility for making change. All of these things are variables for every different business, and so it's hard to say exactly what to do. Right? So there's going to be a little bit of thinking, a little bit of work that everyone needs to do to tailor it to their specific situation, but context is king here, right? But coming back to it, the checklist here is really about like those common elements. Number 3 here, focus on the goals that are proactive, not reactive. One of my biggest complaints about a lot of what we talk about in SRE land is, incident response metrics. And the whole thing focuses so much on the reactive that it really encourages firefighting. If you don't have a way to measure how reliable you are, other than waiting for the next incident to happen, it's going to be a very unfulfilling project and a very unfulfilling life. Like toil becomes mandatory, and which is exactly what we want to minimize, right? So focus on setting goals that are proactive, that use proactive measurement techniques, testing ahead of time, creating situations, creating failures in safe and responsible ways is really just so superior. Number 4, define clear accountability stakes and secure visible interest from your leadership. It's not enough to have like the green light from leadership, because ultimately this is everyone's problem and no one's problem simultaneously in most organizations, right? Everyone can say, oh yeah, reliability is important, and they can feel like they're doing something just by saying reliability is important, or your leadership can feel like they're doing something just by saying or funding a program that is working on reliability. But if your situation requires buy-in from several people, from several different groups, having visible interests from leadership, having them show up to meetings, having them ask engaging questions, having them, just being present in a way that people can see is usually enough accountability to avoid a lot of those false start problems, right? To avoid a lot of the aligning interests problems, right? But you have to have that like gentle social accountability to help people recognize, yes, this is something important. Yes, people will miss it if I don't do it, right? It's visible. Like if I can't make the word visible large enough on this slide and have it get by folks like Gavin. But like the emphasis is really there, right? And last, on leadership and strategy, establish some kind of like milestone-based review and celebration. Like when folks do really, really well, or you like prove reliability in some important ways, like that is worth celebrating, right? Like really reinforce the good work that people are doing, call it out, and like that's the other thing. Like people will do things again if they receive, visible public recognition for doing them. It's easy to forget and regularly surprising just how big of an impact that can have motivation wise, when you really take those moments to celebrate wins. Next, ownership and handoffs. Right now, now we're getting into the little bit more mechanical, like how to run these programs. A little bit of less around like incentives and alignment, to say like, okay, there's a couple of things that you just have to do. You just have to do them because you work in a company that's made up of multiple people, multiple groups, and people come and go. Like we have to live in a world, and that we live in a world where we need to recognize that not everyone will be in the jobs they're in today for very long, right? Like there will be churn, and I promise you they will churn. Like if you have a lasting reliability program, 100% of the people will churn out over the life cycle of it. So there's a couple important things. One, you have to minimize the tribal knowledge on this, right? So writing these things down, making sure that they're well identified, identifying first and foremost who owns this program, right? Like who is going to operationalize this thing? Who is it, like the single person who's going to be responsible for making sure that this checklist is operationalized and followed up on regularly, right? And everyone needs to know who that person is, and that person needs to know who everyone is, who are the stakeholders and who are the people that are participating in the program. After that, and maybe not the same person, centralizing ownership for baselining your applications and your reliability, for baselining it, for coordinating, potentially coordinating the testing of your reliability, and certainly for facilitating the reporting cadence, right? The people who are actually going to like gather the data and or facilitate the review of that data. Number 3, decentralized decentralized ownership for system improvements. There are centralized SRE organizations out there. There's a lot of them. Most of the time, they don't have unilateral authority to go change everything that needs to be changed about a system in order to improve reliability, right? And so we need to understand. Everyone needs to understand who is responsible for those things and for which pieces, right? And to recognize and document that responsibility. And we're not suggesting that you change anything. Just make sure that what you have is identified. Like how is that ownership and responsibility decentralized? And then number 4, create an ownership handoff process. Anyone who's been in this business long enough knows that if you have an app or if you have some components or some infrastructure, the only thing that you know for sure is that the people responsible for those things will change over time, right? They, enter your reorg meme here, right? Like the people responsible will change. Those lines of responsibility will change in ways that you can't anticipate and probably don't make any sense. So if your reliability program is going to, outlast those kind of like change events, it's important to have ownership handoff processes, right? To like document it. Say, hey, this person is no longer, or this group or this person is no longer going to be responsible for this thing over here. They're transitioning it over to here so that they can work on something else, right? Know what that process is. Know what the handoff looks like. What are you going to do to read the new team in on the operations and reliability for that piece, right? What are the new responsibilities that they're inheriting to your reliability program? Write these things out, right? And there's going to be more details in the blog post and the handoff to follow. Next, measurement and metrics, right? It is a whole meme at this point. It's definitely a business meme to measure what matters or whatnot, right? But really, if you're not measuring something, you can't tell whether or not it happened or not, right? You have to measure the things that are important to you. And so there's a couple big important things here. Like you need to know, you need to define the background behind the program. And I know this is like a little bit of a pull on the handbrake, but like you need to measure where you are today, where you were before, right? People need that historical context, because the person who joins the company in the next year won't have that, right? It needs to be someplace recorded, not just tribal knowledge, so that it can be discoverable, so you can see how far you've come, and really help people understand why the program came into place in the first place, right? Second thing you get it regarding measurement metrics: set up consistent, regular, like reliability measurement and normalized scoring. Like you need to know how you're measuring things, and it needs to be consistent across the organization, right? That way you really can compare apples to apples. That way you really can, when you get numbers, like during the handoff meetings, like, hey, we're changing ownership. Great. What does your reliability look like? How do you talk about it? Right. I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm saying generally it's going to depend on the organization. And how you set up the scoring is almost irrelevant, as long as it's done consistently and it's normalized, right? So whether you do like a percentage score or a raw count, or or just like a risk counter, like it kind of doesn't matter. What matters is that you and the rest of your organization understand it well enough to recognize when you are doing well, and recognize where there is something problematic, right? Number 3, record your progress against your goals. And that's a really easy thing to say. And this is where a little bit more Jeff Hard-won opinion is going to come out. It's really important to journal, to have something that's like reverse chronological, something that everyone can and does, right? Like in order for anything, like any progress tracking to be useful, people have to use it, not just for recording, but they have to refer to it, right? This needs to be a place where people go to understand what's happening. It should be centralized. It should be something that is usable and consumable and promotes discovery, right? People need to be able to find it. And not only that, but by going there, people should be able to find other things, right? So this is where, hey, if you made a major effort, and hey, yeah, we've got some numbers to back it up. Don't just include the numbers, cross-link to the, whatever documentation you have for the effort that you made, or meeting notes, or like talk about the people involved. Because in, next month, when you go to like celebrate the big wins or whatever, you need to be able to go back and see that stuff. Or at the end of the year, when you ask yourself, what did we do this last year? Because it's either performance review time, or you're going back to seek more funding to fund expansion of the program, or different reliability changes that need to be made to the systems to actually fund those development efforts. You need to be able to show, to like really quickly discover those big wins, discover where you struggle, discover the impact of not making the reliability improvements, like the actual tactical changes, right? And so these things are again, it's kind of buried in here under measurement metrics, and it's number 3 on this page. But honestly, like this is one of the top things that you can do to really drive accountability and understand the impact that this sort of invisible thing called reliability is having in your organization, right? Record this stuff, get it centralized, have it used.
And this ties back to your proactive measuring, right? Because you don't want to get to the end of a quarter and you say, hey, we didn't have any outages this quarter. It makes it seem like you didn't do anything. Right. But if you put the effort in, you want to be able to show that you actually we prevented outages.
Yep. I mean, and like you want to be able to show without waiting for it to happen, right? You want to be able to show, this comes back to like the testing versus, incident management sort of reactive world, right? We say, hey, we had this issue, we tested it, reproduced it, we went off, made some changes, tested it again, and now we can show, yes, we are not going to have this issue again, right? and celebrate those things over time. And last, on measurement metrics, tie in your your individual component measurements, your golden signals, for your applications, all the way back to the business, right? You want to be able to show, how does this impact customers? Don't just talk about number of incidents. Talk about orders not dropped, or talk about deals closed, or talk about streams served, right? And things that matter to the customer, things that matter to your board of directors. Not something that you're using to measure internally. You want to tie those things together, because that's how you get things funded. And the last big chunk, processes and policies. This is again a little bit more of on the accounting side. But if you're going to put something in place, you want to make sure that it's consistently executable. Right? Consistency is the name of the game in this. If you're really going to drive project or progress over time. I sound like a physical fitness trainer or like a dietitian over here, but this is the whole thing. So there's a handful of things you want to make sure that you have well documented and you execute consistently. Build a catalog of their services, understand who their owners are, who's responsible for them, and make sure that you understand the impact of disruption to those applications and services. What happens if these things go down? What happens if they break? What happens if we have quality problems? And again, you can always talk about, it's easy to talk about engineering metrics, way more impactful to talk about impact to the business. Next, establish biweekly progress reviews. I mean, this is, and it's not enough just to have the meeting, although you do need to have the meeting. People have to come to the meeting. And there's going to be a lot of more opinion coming out here about this. It's important not to have one speaker. And this isn't on the list. If you have progress reviews where you have accountable parties coming in, they need to be made to feel accountable. They should probably present their own performance, right? Don't bring up a dashboard and have one person read the dashboard, because everyone will tune out instantly. No one feels like it's important. No one will prepare for it. And when those meetings are boring as heck. So if you do manage to get that executive or more senior leader to show up, to make that visible interest investment, right? What they're going to do is they're going to show up to an incredibly boring meeting where everyone has their cameras off or they're checked out or whatever, right? They're not paying attention. So engage the community, actually make it a meeting, not the presentation. Do this bi-weekly, right? So that if someone or some team did not make the progress that they needed to, or if they're missing the goals, you're not the one saying, hey, this team missed their goals. They have to stand up and be the one to say, we missed our goals this week. And if they do it in the next round, they're going to say, we missed our goals again. We're not tracking to do this thing, right? Which starts begging the question, okay, well, this has happened the last few weeks in a row. What are you going to do so that you're not saying the same thing next week? Right. And this creates opportunities for those senior leaders, through their visible interest, to be the ones to ask the question. Not in a way that is creating blame or anything, but just genuinely starting a conversation. Right. Often enough, just having them present this, and I've seen this 4 or 5 times in my career now, just having them be the ones to present the data incentivizes, makes them feel accountable for it. Right. And accountability is the name of the game here.
And when we're talking about engineers, this shouldn't be an unfamiliar concept. With sprints, the similar idea, right?
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but you're usually not, sometimes it's the engineers in this. A lot of times it's engineering management, right? Or representatives, a representative from teams. But it all comes back to the whole thing of soft cues for accountability, without being overhanded, to say I don't want anyone to come out here and say oh yeah, we're going to tie everyone's performance reviews to the reliability of their systems, right? You don't need to go that far. It's usually just enough to be, if a person knows that they're going to have to talk to the efforts that they're making and the fact that if their systems are dropping the ball, it's usually enough to incentivize them to take the thing more seriously. And it also, no matter what, helps reinforce the idea that this is something that's important, that people will notice if the work doesn't get done, right? Next, document new service onboarding and run it consistently, right? Real basic stuff. Someone's building a new app, someone's building a new component or platform. Figure out what they need to do in order to onboard with your program, right? A couple short interviews, maybe they fill out a form. Who knows? Maybe they enter maybe they make an entry in your catalog, your service catalog, whatever it is. Just know that you should have it documented, it should be discoverable, and you should expect that it's operated with consistency. Next, define responses to services failing or coming out of compliance with your reliability policies. Like, what happens if all of a sudden, like, firstly, you should know when all of a sudden a service or component becomes less reliable, right? And you should know exactly what the response should be if that becomes the case, right? And everyone should know, hey, this is what's going to happen if we start dropping out, right? And whether or not you want to put in some plan to say, hey, if in the event that we're not, like, this component suddenly not meeting its reliability goals, maybe you have you put in place a plan, like basically a response plan, right? Or maybe you have them report progress more often. Whatever it is and whatever you can get buy-in on, just make sure that it's well documented and that you do measure these things and operationalize it consistently. And last on the checklist, define a response to services coming into compliance. Like, if they've dropped out and you're giving it attention, you need to give at least as much attention when they come back in, right? When they start towing the line. And again, this comes back to celebrating those wins. It feels really good when people can finally put out the fire, right? And you want to make sure that everyone can participate in that in a way that is constructive and visible and celebrated by leadership. And if I haven't said it enough yet today, building reliability is not a one-time sprint. It's not something you can run like a project. You really can't assign a project manager. Whoever takes up this role or takes up the mantle for operationalizing the program, this is a regular role that they will fill until the next person starts filling it, right? Funding it like a project, you're going to have a bad time. You're just going to need to fund it again. And it should be part of your, keep the lights on or engineering excellence budgets. Just account for it and hire for it and expect that reporting call. But it's one thing to say these things, another thing to say, okay, great, you've described a problem. How do I actually get it done? How do I actually start this thing? First and foremost, you got to sell the vision. You got to get buy-in, and not just from your direct line of management, but use those mission statements and the vision, and even agreeing on the problem and impact of the customer. That stuff in strategy and leadership. Shop that around to get alignment, get buy-in on the mission from your peers, right? And validate it with the people who are on the front line getting paged, and really take it on tour. Once you have general agreement and if you get it funded, you get the effort decided that, yeah, we're going to do this. The next thing to do is launch it in program and cohorts. Don't try to bite the whole apple, eat the whole apple at once, right? Like, take bites, nibble at it. Identify some of the more eager, some of the more like low-hanging fruit, and launch them. And learn from each cohort that you launch, right? Because you're going to be figuring this thing out as it goes. You're not going to have the magic bullet right out of the gate. You're going to have to iterate and tweak and iterate and learn. And so using small cohorts, quarterly launches, half yearly launches will help you really make an impact over time. And also, like, when people see others having success launching, it builds confidence in the program overall, right? Number 3, yeah, I guess I already said it. You gotta operate it and iterate, and it needs consistency. All things operations no matter what. Even if you feel like you're doing the wrong thing, you have to operate it with consistency long enough to be highly confident that making a change to the way you operate it will have an impact, right? You need to make sure that you got real data to support these things. And so that's just clean operations stuff. If you start seeing problems, ask yourself before, like every time, is this a problem with the process, or is the problem, like, have we even followed the process? Have we even followed the policy? Have we executed on those ceremonies that we've defined in the program, right? Because if you haven't, maybe walk it back, do it again with a little bit more consistency so that you can make a real call one way or another. And I say all this, as a employee at Gremlin. And, again, our goal here is to build a more reliable internet. That's our mission. And that includes building the tools for doing the testing. Yes. But it also means building the tools to help you build these reliability programs, right? Our reliability management product is all about this. We include, obviously, a safe and secure fault injection suite. That's at the core of what we do. But we've also gone, above and beyond and basically set standard reliability tests and risk detection so that you can get started quickly, so that you can just find those low hanging fruit really, really quickly. And, honestly, this is like the 80-20 rule. Out of the box, you can probably get 80% of the value instantly, right? And that last 20% is where those bespoke things about your business, your systems, your organization, that's the thing that you really want to focus on over time, right? Because most reliability problems are very common, right? So we can say with confidence, these are the things you can do. If you do this one thing, good to go. You shouldn't have to invent that yourself, right? It's commodity. Next, dashboarding. Like, if you're running tests with Gremlin, all of that, like a lot of the measuring and dashboarding and aggregating of data, you've got that. Like we've done that for you. You can just use it. You don't have to worry about like building out your own decks and dashboards and bespoke data collection pipelines. You can absolutely, like, I'm not saying don't do it if you don't use us. Just I want you to do it so that you can make progress, right? But you can also just use what we've got. Next, custom scenarios and test suites. Again, chasing those more bespoke set of issues that affect your platform and in very specific ways. You can model all of that. And of course, and maybe most importantly, operationalizing your testing. It's one thing to operationalize your meetings and your processes for handing things off, but you want to make sure that you're consistently driving the data flow, right? And by consistently, I don't mean constantly. I mean with regularity, in a way that you can anticipate. When you're going to get the next round of data. When you're going to be measured next, right? And people can begin building, like adjusting their workflows to how they're being measured, right? So we have all of that for you, but again, we just want you to be successful. That's why we're here. Next steps for you. We've got a checklist, a little bit more, like you don't have to go rewatch the webinar every single time or get the deck. We've got a great checklist for you with all of these bullet points. You can absolutely jump in and try Gremlin for yourself. We got free 30-day trials. It's a full access trial. It's not, stripped of anything, right? Get in there, get your hands dirty, see what we've got, install the agents, start getting some data and see whether try to envision what your workflow would look like. And last, get out there and put it to use. And if you want to have conversations about this, we love this stuff. We talk about this all day. This is what we do, and we're here to help, even if it's just being someone who will listen to you, right? To let you know that yes, the things you're getting frustrated with are common enough. Here's some of the things that other people have done. We can be that support for you. So that's it. I think we got a couple minutes left for Q&A, maybe.
Yes, we do. And I can personally attest that Jeff does in fact love to talk about this all day. This is truth. That checklist, by the way, is also available as a handout. If you just poke the little handout thing in the upper right corner, you can grab it right now. You'll also get it emailed. We do have a couple questions that came in. First one I'll pull from the chat, so I make sure I don't miss it, which is, how do we record data and progress efficiently? Before you answer, I'm also going to say we do have another webinar about this with another one of our engineering leads, Sam Rossoff, who has a spreadsheet that you can use. You can also use Gremlin. That's our official plug. But Jeff, I'll let you answer.
I mean, it really comes down to what data we're talking about, because, you know, thinking about like the reliability program overall, you obviously have your test data. You know, how reliable are we? You should be informed by your incident data, but the test data is really what you want to build things upon, and it's just a little bit more of a direct measurement. How do you record it? However you will look at it, I guess is the core thing, right? Like it's much easier to write things down or to record data than it is to get them used consistently, right? And so what I would say is, if you have a meeting, or if you can build the muscles where people come to a meeting expecting to see it, or if you can manage to build the muscles where you have a place where people go to find these things, or if it's a common enough question in leadership conversations where you're deciding what projects to take on next, or road mapping, that kind of stuff. However they will read it, however they will use it, is probably the thing you should be optimizing for. Recording data, there's a lot of ways to do it. Like, you can use a spreadsheet if you want to, or if you're testing through Gremlin, we record all of that, and you can get historical data. You can get, you know, quick snapshots for your posture across your entire team or your organization. But in my experience, it's usually the using the data that needs more attention than the writing data. I would say you do need accountability. If you have distributed responsibility for independently measuring your systems, there's a real big question around, like, how do you get everyone how do you distribute accountability, not just the ownership of creating the data. And that's where, the part, like the weekly meeting, comes in. I mean, if you go to say, hey, Gavin, you're next up on the docket to review your app's reliability, but I see that you haven't recorded any data here. What's up with that? Right? Like, can you tell us where you're at? And we'll bring up your dashboard, and your dashboard will be empty, or your line on the spreadsheet will be empty. And then I get to say, so what happened there, Gavin? And Gavin will say, well, I didn't get to it this week. And be like, well, I guess maybe get to it, or I guess we're going to have to talk about it next week. And
I would like to point out that was very intimidating, but it was also very nice. And I think it's a good balance to get there.
You don't need to be intimidating, but just have a little bit of that social pressure to follow through, right? I think is usually more than enough.
Yeah. And then we'll also jump into this question of, how do you tackle challenges where you have a wide variety of tools? Good question. We're just starting to use Gremlin for chaos testing, but also Dynatrace for observability, Splunk for logs and custom metrics, in-house tools. We do see this a lot. So how do we manage that, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's when you have tool dispersion like that, especially for like diverse teams, or I guess like not individual teams that are diverse, but diversity across the teams in your organization. Some teams use XYZ more than others. I've been in multiple organizations where we have multiple, observability platforms, where we've got, hey, these 4 teams use an Elk cluster, and these guys over here use Datadog, and these guys over here use Splunk. And it's just kind of like everyone kind of stood up their own thing, and we haven't unified. And of course, there will be a grand unification program that people have been talking about for years, but no one's actually making motion on it. When you have tool, I mean, I guess what's important is let it be led by the ceremony that you use to review. So the commonality is like, yeah, we're going to have, if you can get to the point where you have buy-in and you have a, unified biweekly reliability meeting where different teams present their own stuff. One, you could say, yeah, different teams present their own stuff. And so they kind of like bring their own data to support their bit. You could absolutely do that, because at that point, like, the common platform for reporting is the meeting, or it is the journal where you're recording what has happened. Alternatively, you could say, this reliability program, in order to participate in this reliability program, you have to get your data into this, right? And you don't say, like, I'm not saying like onboarding all of your telemetry, all of your operational metrics, things like that, all of your observability. But at the very least, say, like, these are the things that we have to have measured for all of our services and components. They can either be point in time, weekly reports, or whatever. And this is kind of where, like, if you can get to the point where you're doing reliability testing, either feel free, like, Gremlin isn't common enough platform. But even just a spreadsheet, man, like, anything you can do to get it all, like, the numbers that you care about in one place. And this is part of like normalized scoring bit, right? It's the same thing. Like, you have to normalize scoring, normalize scales, and recording it in one place. And people have to know where it will be consumed from. Like, people like focus a lot on writing. Like, where do we write these things? Where can I record these things? How can I record things more effectively? At the end of the day, all of that gets dominated by, how people actually consume the information. You got to put it where it's going to be consumed. And so that's where you have a lot of power as the people running the reliability program, is to say, we consume data here. So get your data here. If it's not here, it's invisible to us, right? And really reinforce that.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, which is, you mentioned rewarding and celebrating teams for improvements or successes as one way to incentivize teams. But what are other patterns for initial buy-in for those teams and moving them to start working towards improvements autonomously? That buy-in question, we hear a lot.
Well, I have, different teams are going to find different solutions more tolerable than others. Ultimately, if you want, really what I hear you talking about is, sort of, emergent accountability, right? I want to do this because I have to, because it's important to me. Why is it important to me? Because I'm held accountable one way or another. For me, the strongest accountability I've ever seen for quality happened when I was at Amazon. And it's because we had aligned, like the way that we run pagers there and the scale that we were doing business at, aligned operational quality and reliability. It aligned our interests with the customers very, very well, all the way up through the management chain, right? Like, and so if we were shipping unreliable software or a low quality product, we felt it very directly through the pager. Now, not all orgs work that way, and you certainly have, most organizations have very I would say more specialists, right? Where you have if you're working like an ITIL organization or something like that, like where you have like, I'm a programmer, I'm a tester, I'm an ops person, I'm system administration, DevOps, or automation, stuff like that. In that world, it's much more difficult to socialize, because you run into a lot more that's not my job. And so in those worlds, that's where you need to say, okay, we've specialized our skill sets of our employees in such a way that, like, actually it really isn't their job, right? So how do we now create more accountability to do better? And you're going to have to like kind of step up as a management, as management, to say, to find new ways to create systems of accountability. In my experience, most of management and the hardest bit to learn is how to create and manage systems of accountability that are not obvious or that don't alienate the team, right? Tying everything back to performance review is a really bad way to do it. It's the biggest sledgehammer you have, right? So social accountability works really, really well. Having people present their own progress is great. And we talked about celebrations. Like, having visible leadership interest is massive, right? People want to say, like, I want to know that my work matters. So if you can, having like visible feedback from the customer would probably be the most powerful thing, right? Because like that really is my work matters. It matters directly to the customer. When I was at, and this is a bit unrelated, but when we were at PayPal, one of the first things that happened while I was there was when the PPP loan checks went out. And there was just a whole bunch of stuff around like, hey, what are we going to do here? And, leadership at Venmo was like, we need we have an opportunity to help people, continue, doing business and like having livelihoods. And, in a matter of 2 weeks, they cranked out a check depositing and cashing system for Venmo. Like, they literally 2 weeks cranked it out, got it done, and it made huge difference to the customer. And it was like one of those great moments where the people building the systems could see and even personally benefit from like, it was personal impact. It was very, very big. People who worked on that project are very, very proud. And, the next, they brought that energy right into the next thing they were doing. So, reliability is a little bit of a different situation, but like people notice when things break, right? And anything we can do to help them recognize that they're making a difference can help socialize that.
Great. I think we are at time. Thank you, everyone, for attending. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Jeff or myself. Thank you very much. You will get a recording of this and an email with the checklist. Thank you all for attending.